Next, on Currents News, they are serving God and country. A veteran group recruiting the young to help their fellow soldiers, and they want you. Then, a special Memorial Day story. They were deemed no-hopers.
Chances were that you were dead within about 18 months.
But an expert tells us how wounded World War II vets went on to shape this country. Plus, an Oakland bishop robbed at gunpoint. His message to the thief.
Right behind you. You're right after.
Yeah! Then, meet the man stepping up to the plate, becoming a priest in the Diocese of Brooklyn. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. They defended this nation. Now, Catholic war veterans are looking to help their fellow soldiers in any way they can. But their numbers are dwindling, so they're upping their recruitment efforts to ensure they can continue their work well into the future. Currents News' Emily Druby reports from their base in Belrose, Queens.
A door that's always open. The Catholic War Veterans and Auxiliary of the USA.
Thanks for your service.
Thank you.
You may not have heard of them, but they rely on their Catholic faith to help veterans, especially those struggling monetarily, physically, or even mentally. And now they want you.
So we're trying to grow both organizations at one time.
The group is recruiting for their two divisions. There's one for veterans and for family. It's needed. National Commander David Crum says 20 years ago, they had over 250,000 members.
Now we're about 8,000 combined.
They've seen a large loss of members. This year, about 100 national members passed away. The Department of Defense estimates only 1% of Americans have served or are serving in the military, and only 25% of them are Catholic.
The Immaculate Conception Church, Astoria Post 1, is where Monsignor Higgins founded the organization in 1935.
The group started in the Diocese of Brooklyn by Monsignor Edward Higgins, with the first members coming from his parish, Immaculate Conception Church in Astoria. 86 years later, the headquarters is now in Belrose, Queens, a space filled with treasure.
This is a relic from Saint Sebastian.
But the greatest treasure is what they do for others, providing funerals for impoverished veterans, helping deal with the notoriously difficult VA, and providing a safe space to talk and be heard, crucial for those who are struggling mentally, watching their sicks.
Again, the comradeship. Hey, I went through that. It'll pass. Maybe I went to therapy. Maybe you should go to therapy because it helped me. It will help you. So that's the things we have to put out there.
While members must be Catholic, they help everyone.
We don't care what military branch you were in, what religion you are.
But in order to continue this important work, they need new and young blood. Now, they're doubling down their recruitment efforts, using targeted mailings, events outside of churches, and even working with bishops across the state, so they can continue to fight for God and for country. In Belrose, Emily Druby, Currents News.
They're holding their national convention for members this August in Astoria. For more information, or if you or anyone you know would like to join, just go to wp2.cwv.org. And coming up later on Currents News, we honor the wounded who came home from the war and lived on to fight another battle. We'll talk to the award-winning author of Wheels of Courage in just a bit. Now to the tragic shooting in San Jose, California, where witnesses say the gunman seemed to target certain victims while he let others live. The shooter, armed with two semi-automatic handguns, shot coworkers in two buildings at the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, but bypassed others, according to reports. 9 people were killed before the gunman took his own life. His ex-wife says he spoke about killing people at work more than a decade ago. Many of the victims were longtime employees ranging in age from 29 to 63. They worked as mechanics, linemen, rail operators. One of the victims, an assistant superintendent. San Jose's mayor said it was clear that the gunman knew his victims well, but a motive has yet to be determined. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops responded forcefully to this latest tragedy, writing, "This shooting reminds us once again that something fundamentally broken in our society and culture must be courageously examined and addressed so that ordinary places no longer become scenes of violence and contempt for human life. It is particularly tragic that in a city named in honor of St. Joseph, who was such a loving guardian of the Holy Family, we are unable to protect our own fellow citizens from the ravages of gun violence." Senate Republicans are proposing a $928 billion infrastructure plan in an effort to break the logjam over the Biden administration's $1.7 trillion version. The GOP plan is an increase from their original offer, but negotiators argue the big question is the scope of the bill.
What we are looking at today is a $928 billion package over 8 years. It sticks to the core infrastructure features that we talked to initially. It's a serious effort to try to reach a bipartisan agreement.
President Biden says he will meet with the GOP lead negotiator to discuss the plan sometime next week. He's expected to release a $6 trillion budget proposal on Friday. A bishop in California was robbed at gunpoint over the weekend while praying the rosary. But during his homily on Pentecost Sunday, Oakland Bishop Michael Barber told his parishioners that he forgives the gunman.
But for any here who have been victims of crime, in our hearts, we can take along anger and revenge, or we can replace that with the love of Jesus.
The suspect made off with cash and the bishop's Episcopal ring. The Oakland Police Department is currently investigating the robbery. Here in New York, police have arrested the 3 suspects who harassed a group of Jewish men over the weekend. Police say this trio drove up to 4 men standing in front of a synagogue in Borough Park Saturday and started yelling anti-Semitic remarks. When the victims hid inside the synagogue, the suspects then damaged a nearby parked car. The 3 men now face hate crime-related charges. In response to the recent spike of anti-Semitic attacks, U.S. bishops released a statement saying, "We cannot remain silent when we witness our brothers and sisters suffering on account of being Jewish, and we will never tire of our commitment to decry every form of hatred, especially those formed in contempt of faith." The suffering in the Middle East continues even after the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. And now the United Nations is looking into whether Israeli airstrikes in Gaza could be considered war crimes. At the same time, the global organization is sending aid to help rebuild Gaza. Scenes of ruin and destruction are what's left in Gaza after a ceasefire was announced between Israel and Palestine. The United Nations has allocated $18.6 million from its Central Emergency Response Fund to address the rising humanitarian needs in Gaza.
Strong financial support is, of course, crucial to meet the needs, especially in Gaza and also in the West Bank. It is also critical that the occupied Palestinian territory humanitarian fund is replenished. This is a flexible tool to quickly respond to urgent needs.
The UN has sent 13 trucks filled with food, COVID-19 vaccines, and medical supplies into Gaza after its border with Israel was partially reopened. It expects to send even more aid to the region during the ceasefire.
Following the ceasefire announcement, the number of people seeking protection in UNRWA schools has now decreased to less than 1,000.
Pope Francis praised the news of the ceasefire and called for a new phase of diplomacy in the region.
Ringrazio Dio per la decisione di fermare gli scontri armati e auspico che si percorrano le vie del dialogo e della pace.
In recent weeks, the Pope has repeatedly asked Christians worldwide to pray that Israel and Palestine may be patient in their dialogue and pursue a peaceful coexistence. The UN's Human Rights Council passed a resolution calling for the creation of a commission of inquiry which would monitor and report on rights violations in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, and would investigate all underlying root causes of recurrent tensions there. There's a lot more news headed your way. We continue with our series, Answering the Call, looking at how one man's faith has taken him on a journey from the Dominican Republic to the States. Plus, the movement that inspired a nation. Christopher Awards winner David Davis joins us with a remarkable story from the greatest generation. And join us at the end of the show as we honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. We'll be right back. 4 new priests are coming to the Diocese of Brooklyn. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has been sharing their stories of how they found themselves answering God's call. And Jessica joins us now to tell us about one soon-to-be priest who is really a home run for the diocese.
That's right, Christine. You know, we've all heard of Alex Rodriguez, Sammy Sosa, and Big Papi Ortiz. Well, here in the Diocese of Brooklyn, we're getting our own baseball player from the Dominican Republic. They call him Little Papi, Deacon Elvin Torres, and he's been practicing his whole life to play for this team.
Deacon Elvin Torres steps up to the plate. And it's another home run.
I think baseball, it runs in Dominican blood.
He's happiest when he's doing what he loves. Sometimes he's in a baseball uniform. And other times, he's wearing vestments. Growing up, the Dominican Republic was home base. Faith, family, and of course, baseball were all he ever needed.
Growing up, like taking all the socks, putting together, making a ball. Sometimes you don't have enough money to buy a ball.
His family is here visiting, cheering him on through everything. His parents are devout Catholics, but as he got older, his faith deepened. He began to see priests as superstars.
Why he dressed like that? Why he did all the things that he did at the altar? Why he talked and everybody have to listen to him?
But once he was old enough to realize priests don't get married, he was out, wanting instead to play the position of a family man.
So I had a friend, and we became a boyfriend and girlfriend. It was a beautiful relationship, but I didn't feel complete. I was missing something.
Then life threw him a curveball. He entered the seminary, earned degrees in philosophy and theology that brought him to the Diocese of Brooklyn. His home parish of St. Rita in East New York took him in 5 years ago, and now he's ready for the big leagues. On his seminary team, the Relics, Deacon Elvin says whether he was at Mass or at bat, God was always with him, and every hit and the rare strikeout has led him here.
If you are playing, if you are praying, if you are working, God is there.
He can still remember every home run and the feeling that came with them, but he says nothing compares to this.
I've never been so happy. And for the ordination, I don't know, but it would be, with no doubt, the best day of my life, for sure.
Like I said, Deacon Elvin's parents are here. They're going to be staying with him through his ordination, and he's so thrilled to have them. Christine, can you believe before this he hadn't seen them in 2 years because of the pandemic?
Ah, wow, what an incredible reunion. Jess, in your piece you said that while his family is really devout, that the deacon had to go out on his own a bit to explore his faith.
Yeah, that's right. You know, he grew up having faith being a central part of his life with his family, but he said that it really wasn't until he was old enough for himself to experience God's love that his faith deepened.
All right, thanks, Jess. We look forward to your next deacon profile. And you can watch the priesthood ordination live right here on Net TV. It takes place Saturday, June 5th at 11 in the morning from the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph. U.S. bishops are moving forward with their discussion regarding the worthiness of communion during their spring assembly. Earlier this month, 67 bishops penned a letter to the USCCB's president asking to remove the item from the agenda. However, Los Angeles Archbishop Jose Gomez says the request for discussion has already been approved by an administrative committee. The decision follows an increasingly public debate among bishops on whether or not Catholic politicians who support abortion should be denied the Eucharist. Another issue of importance to U.S. bishops is immigration, and the American Civil Liberties Union is pushing for vaccinations for detained migrants. The ACLU sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security demanding the immigrants get access to COVID-19 vaccines. As of May 5th, out of the more than 22,000 in custody, just over 2,700 had received at least one dose. As we take time this Memorial Day weekend to remember those who died while fighting for our country, today we're focusing on the wounded who came home from World War II and fought for the disabled. In the Christopher Award-winning book, Wheels of Courage, How Paralyzed Veterans from World War II Invented Wheelchair Sports, Fought for Disability Rights, and Inspired a Nation, author David Davis writes about how before World War II, if you were paralyzed, you were considered what he calls a no-hoper. But the war was a game changer.
Before World War II, if you were paralyzed, and especially in battle, a severe battle injury, and you were a paraplegic, chances were that you were dead within about 18 months. And that was because mostly infection, bacteria. They didn't have penicillin. And penicillin is developed in the 1930s and then used very effectively when the war starts in vast quantities. The other thing that was happening was better battlefield medical care, so that those who were injured were taken right to the surgical theaters very quickly, so they were attended to quickly. They also were evacuated from the battlefield more quickly, so that they got great care back in the States or wherever the hospitals were. So it was a combination of things, and such that they had learned, unfortunately, from the problems at World War I.
Davis calls the disabled World War II vets pioneers who created a new paradigm for people with disabilities. He writes that they took charge of their fates and integrated themselves into society, from inventing wheelchair sports to fighting for the rights of the disabled.
At the time, think about it, there were no curb cutouts, there were no ramps to buildings, no buses that would kneel. Disability was stigmatized, not just in the United States, but all over. And there had never been this vast number of, in this particular case, paraplegics. So they did take their fate in their hands. And all they were saying was, if you can help with accessibility and accommodation, we can do anything. We can hold down jobs. We can, if you have cars that have hand controls, we can go into the cars, put our wheelchairs in the back seat, drive to a job, drive to a home. And that was the other thing, homes that were built to accommodate their disability. So you had ramps, you had widened doorways, you had bathrooms that were accessible for when you were in a wheelchair.
Davis tells us 2 companies in the Diocese of Brooklyn stepped up and put the disabled veterans to work, Bulova Watch Company and Pan Am, and both created wheelchair basketball teams. You can get a copy of David Davis's book, Wheels of Courage, on Amazon.com or at a bookstore near you. Still to come on Currents News, the dispensation from Sunday Mass will soon be lifted. We'll discuss safety precautions as churches return to full capacity. Churches in the Diocese of Brooklyn are back at full capacity, and soon the dispensation from Sunday Masses will be lifted. Here to talk about what led to that decision and what safety precautions you can expect in your parish is the Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio, with former Tablet editor Ed Wilkinson for this week's Into the Deep. Ed.
Thank you, Christine, and we're with Bishop DiMarzio today. Bishop, when we went to church last weekend, we saw the ropes were gone, all the pews were open, the church was ready for 100% capacity. So why did you decide at this time that we're ready to go back to taking everybody back into church?
Well, it wasn't my decision alone. Obviously, it's the government telling us that things are safe and that we can go back to full capacity. So that's where we're following the law and the recommendations that are coming from the state government and the national government, actually, at this time.
Now, Bishop, I see that lay ministers will be back in the sanctuary this week for liturgical exercises. What are some of the other restrictions that have been lifted in the liturgies?
Well, that we can have lay ministers in the sanctuary, the altar servers are back, collections also can be taken up. Various things that, we imposed because of the COVID restrictions now have been lifted. It's coming back more or less to normal.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the issues is that not everybody is vaccinated. So if people are vaccinated, they can go without a mask. We still recommend that they use a mask because we have other people who are not vaccinated. Sometimes they will wear a mask, sometimes they might not. So for safety's sake, until we're really over this pandemic, there's some precautions still need to be taken. We still will be using disinfectant in the churches, maybe not as frequently after every mass, but certainly after a series of masses. And it's something we'll grow into because we have to see how the pandemic peters out.
Yeah. Some people still seem to have a problem getting vaccinated. They either don't trust the vaccination or they just think it was rushed through. And they feel they're being discriminated against because they haven't been vaccinated. What do we say to people like that?
Well, again, I think the majority, half of the population now has been vaccinated. There has been very little report of any adverse reactions. People may have many reasons why they're hesitant, but again, we don't get to herd immunity, as they call it, maybe 70%, we're not going to be as protected as we should be. Mm-hmm. So I'm encouraging people, again, think about getting vaccinated. It's a responsibility to yourself and to other people. So that's an important thing we need to consider or overcome. The moral objections are really not holding, and it should be something we do for the sake of others and ourselves.
Pope Francis has actually said that we have a moral obligation to other people to get vaccinated and protect ourselves and them. Do you see it as an obligation, a moral obligation?
I do. It's a moral obligation. You know, the Sixth Commandment says, "Thou shalt not kill yourself, not kill other people." You know, this is a lethal kind of virus, and we have a responsibility to take all the precautions we can.
Mm-hmm. What would have to happen for you to reconsider putting the restrictions back in effect?
Well, I think, again, government advice, but also a spike. If it becomes obvious that we have a spike again, people are getting sick, we'd have to go back to some of the restrictions that preserved us during this time.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the reactions that you're getting from pastors about sanitizing the churches and keeping up with all the restrictions?
I don't think there was ever any pushback on the requirements we put in. They were very conscientious in doing it. The parishioners came forth and volunteered and helped. So I don't think that's a problem. We're just happy that we can get back to full capacity. It won't be exactly full. Still, there will be some kind of distancing for people who are not vaccinated, but close to capacity.
Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
Okay, now we're going back to Christine at the news desk.
Thanks, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. Stargazers the world over were treated to a rare interstellar double feature Wednesday night. The largest moon of the year just happened to coincide with 2021's first lunar eclipse. And the result? A large and vivid super blood moon. This particular eclipse also held historical significance as it marks nearly 60 years since President Kennedy championed America to explore the moon. Pretty cool. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. In honor of those who have served and those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country, we leave you now with a tribute to say thank you for your service. Hope to see you again next time.